All right, y'all. I want to talk a little bit about the problem solution organizational pattern. And the problem solution organizational pattern is obviously a two main point speech. This is a very simple speech, but it has a lot of complex elements. The introduction is going to be the same four that you're used to with the topical organizational pattern, as well as the spatial organizational pattern and the chronological organizational pattern. The Monroe motivated sequence does not have these three items. In my belief, the Monroe motivated sequence should have the statement of credibility in addition to the tension getter, but in its purest form, that is not necessary. Three types of persuasive organizational patterns that you can use are the topical, the problem solution, and the Monroe motivated sequence. The first main point of your problem solution organizational pattern is going to be the problem. And if you think about it, there's a lot of different ways you can break this down. You may have a problem that's an attitudinal problem. So people like that it's a problem, they don't know it's a problem, or they just are unaware that it's a problem. So they love that it's a problem, they don't know that it's a problem, or they're unaware that it's a problem. In either regard, whatever the cause is in terms of people's mindsets or beliefs or lack of education of it, think about what the solution to that would be. The solution to, let me just get rid of this for a second. The solution to attitudinal oftentimes is a public relations campaign, or it's actually, that's what it is in my mind. It's a public relations campaign of some sort, whether it's to educate the public or to reorient their perception on the problem, or to find yourself some new people who think it's the problem. Oftentimes it's difficult to change public opinion, but you can do that through effective public relations. The second cause of many problems are structural. These are rules, policies, they're codified within some sort of government structure. So I hyper-focus in politics. I don't get involved at the county level or the state level, or even I didn't watch national news or global news for 5 years. And quite frankly, I watched it for a little while when it was going on with the pandemic, and I immediately quit doing that. I only focus on the municipal level. So when I do politics, I usually pull the ordinance. It's called the Muni Code, and I can read all the ordinances, or it's the Land Development Code. The LDC is what we call it. So the LDC are the guiding rules to how people use land within a community. And if an apartment is allowed to be built there, or if a huge, like Amazon, a big Amazon warehouse, is that allowed to be next to a ma and pa store, or more importantly, someone's residence? So once again, the causes to problems, if there's a problem to something, it's usually because people don't know it's a problem, or they like that it's a problem, or they just don't care, okay? Structural are rules and ordinances, laws, that sort of thing. The effects of a problem are usually fourfold, and you may just pick one, or you may think, oh, my problem is twofold. It's pretty much how you want to organize your speech. Short-term impacts, long-term impacts, and then things that we can quantify with data and much less tangible notions. Short-term. So if someone's going to build an apartment complex in your neighborhood, what would be some short-term problems with that? Well, probably the traffic and all the noise. And you cannot quantify how aggravating it is for something to, and in fact, I should show you all some pictures of what they did to my block. At some point, I'm going to make a documentary of what they did to my block. But the pure air quality on my block, when they ripped up my street, I literally taped up my windows with black plastic, and people were calling me crazy. But there were people who got very sick on my block because they were outside watching them do that. And those were finely packed particulates when they were ripping up my street. You can't quantify the aggravation that I endured. Now, you can quantify how much dust was out there, or the number of people who get sick from inhaling that stuff, but the pure aggravation of hearing them bang around my block for months is something you can't quantify. So that would be qualitative. So someone's liberty, democracy, right to privacy, right to bear arms. Now, some people may say if you take away one gun, that's all of it, and you can quantify that. I've heard a student say that one time, but maybe oftentimes you can't necessarily quantify that. So short term, Someone builds an apartment complex in your community and you got lots of traffic and maybe lots of aggravation. You cannot assign a dollar amount to or a percentage, that sort of thing. What about if they built an apartment complex in your neighborhood? What would be the long-term effects? Well, not only traffic. Now, the short term would maybe be like all the workers, because, I've had folks, friends of mine, in fact, this is going on in Hopkins right now. They're working on Hopkins Street. It's a historic block. People's pier and beams are getting ruined, literally out of the gate from all that heavy equipment. Or their windows are getting busted out. So that's a short-term aggravation. The long-term is now your pier and beam's messed up and you got to fix it. But the long-term may be gentrification, increased crime. Now maybe you've got some noisy neighbors all of a sudden because it's a huge apartment complex when once it was, a quiet place. So that would be your long-term impacts. Quantitative impacts are notions that you can quantify with a dollar amount, a percentage figure, that sort of thing. And then here are things that you can't necessarily assign a dollar amount to. Whatever your solution is, you should make sure so if you talk about attitude, maybe in your solution, and then maybe you talk about, quantitative. You've got both of those for whatever your speech is. Make sure that your solution directly solves whatever this is. Now, another trick of the trade that I like to use a lot of times is the notion of criteria. Can you tell I used to give this lecture on the blackboard? It was all out of my head. I mean, that's literally how I've taught this for years. This is a secret weapon that I love. And it's basically you're saying, here's the standard by which we should evaluate this problem. Now, you could put this notion up here when you talk about the problem. You could even make this like right here. You could even like kind of make this your ASA point right there. And you could say, when we look, like for me, let's talk about the sidewalk. Let me shut this air off. So when we look at the notion of the need for sidewalks, we need to make sure that the sidewalks don't impact a historical neighborhood. The sidewalk doesn't impact heritage live oaks, that a sidewalk does not increase flooding, and that it follows our standards of two-sided street sidewalks. And then you could talk about maybe the problem in San Marcos is that we've got sidewalks, we don't have infrastructure for them. The problem without sidewalks is that people's long-term health is impacted because they have nowhere to walk, or maybe it's dangerous, and maybe you can throw out some data about how many people get hurt. Maybe it ruins quality of life that you can't walk around, and then you would go through your solution. Or you can utilize this here, down here in your solution, say, look, the problem is that we don't have sidewalks, and then you can kind of go through all your notions and then answer them, and then say and then you could say the standard by which we look at the solution for sidewalks is with the following evaluations. When we implement a sidewalk project, we're going to make sure we don't do it in a historical neighborhood, because my research says you should never put a new sidewalk in a historical neighborhood because the lack of a sidewalk is drainage. And so basically on my block, they've put cement in a drainage, like what are those things called? Drainage, like a drainage, I can't remember the name, wherever the water goes. Basically, the metaphor is they basically cemented that up because you never put a new sidewalk in an older neighborhood because the lack of the sidewalk was the drainage. So you may say the solution to sidewalks should always have these fourfold notions. It should make sure that it's safe, that the neighbors want it, that it doesn't impact heritage live oaks, that sort of thing. Think of the criteria or the criterion as the set of lenses that you look through. So if I go into class and I go, everybody who's got a ball cap on, and I use this example in my podcast, and this stuff here, all of this here, I think it's like my Capoletta Secret Weapons lecture on the podcast on SoundCloud, is I talk about all of this. And an example of this would be, if you want to make it my A in my class, you got to have a baseball cap on. It's not your attendance, it's not your performance on the exams, nor is it the speeches that you upload to your Google Drive. It's just how you dress at my class. Which one of these do you think is singular and which one of these do you think is plural? That's right. Criterion is singular. So you may say, The criterion that we should use when we look at a gun control policy is BLAM, or the criteria, which would be multiple fold, and you would say BLAM, BLAM, and BLAM. So that's just a quick, lecture on problem solution. To me, this bad boy or bad girl, you can mix it up however you want, but I want you to have the concepts visually. I've already have a lecture up on this on SoundCloud, but I've been pumping these out for y'all, so I figured I might as well just make one more. And then, of course, you've got your conclusion at the bottom, right? So this would be your introduction here. And then you would have your 4 different elements, of your introduction. And then you've got your main point number 1. And then, of course, you would have your conclusion down here. And probably spelled it wrong, yeah. And then, obviously, the conclusion has your review of main points. And then it's got your memorable closing. So that's all there is to making a problem solution speech. This is a fun one to organize. It's very straightforward. You can kind of use this in a myriad of different, even like a sales pitch. Whoops, concussion. Well, it's not funny, but it is, there we go, conclusion, boom. Whoops. Well, anyway, I don't even know why I'm formatting it. I've just always lectured this right out of my brain in the class, but I figured I'd put up the Monroe Motivated Sequence for y'all, so I just thought it would be helpful. So this would be your main point number 1, this would be your main point number 2, and then actually, for the solution, I would just make each one of these A or B. Excuse me. Whew. The allergies have been just driving me bonkers, y'all, this week. And I really don't care how you organize this. A lot of people like things like A, B, or C. Other people like to use bullets. It just depends upon you. Usually I'm a bullet person, but something like this, you may want it to be more formulatic. Clearly, I don't do this a lot. Okay, there you go. And then you could have A, B here. It depends what you want to do. So I hope this helps explain a little bit about how the problem solution organizational pattern works. And then I'll be sure to answer any questions that you guys have in class. All right, thank you for listening to the lecture.